Good Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. Kansas City Chiefs, last-second field goal to win the Super Bowl, defeating Philadelphia Eagles by 3 points. So Andy Reid wins another Super Bowl. Both of them with Mahomes, made it there with Donovan McNabb of the Eagles as well. It kind of got us to thinking. So let's take a look. All-time winningest head coaches in playoff history, and we'll tell you who their quarterbacks are. And Bill Belichick, 31. A lot of the wins with Tom Brady as his quarterback. Andy Reid had Donovan McNabb and Pat Mahomes. He now has 22 second all-time. Tom Landry, 20. That was Roger Staubach as his quarterback. Don Shula, 19. He had Bob Greasy and Dan Marino. Joe Gibbs, 17, and it's kind of interesting. He had Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, Mark Rippon. So, again, decent quarterbacks, not quite the level of the other guys that we're going to talk about as well. Chuck Noll, 16. He had Terry Bradshaw. Mike Holmgren, 13. Brett Favre for most of them. Tom Coughlin, 12. He had Eli Manning. Bill Cowher, 12. He had Ben Roethlisberger. And Dan Reeves is 10th. And he had John Elway for most of those. Let's welcome in Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegraph, as well as BrownZone.com. So, Scott, the bottom line is, and the reason I want to bring this up is, if you do not have a quarterback, you are not winning at a high level. And you want to know why the Browns have struggled and found a quarterback since probably Bernie Kosar.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The coach and quarterback are forever linked. It's the number one, in my opinion, quarterback, followed by coach, are the 1 and 2 reasons for success in the NFL, especially sustained success. You know, you don't see a guy like Brian Billick on that list because he had Trent Dilfer. He had the best defense maybe in the history of football. They won 1 Super Bowl because they didn't have a quarterback, right? And I think that's consistent throughout decades and probably more true now than ever, given the rules that favor the offense. So, yeah, you know, I don't think you can adequately judge any coach, and that includes Kevin Stefanski, until he has time with what you think is a legitimate starting quarterback.
And that would be Deshaun Watson. If you're giving up, 3 first-round picks, all the other assets that you gave up, and you're paying him $230 million, that is guaranteed. You have said, this guy is our guy.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, that was their mission after the 2021 season, right? It was to upgrade significantly from Baker Mayfield. And they targeted Deshaun Watson. And they landed him, and he better be the guy. If he's not, you're probably going to have a new coach. You might even have a new front office. They believe Deshaun Watson can put them in the discussion with teams like the Chiefs and the Eagles. Now, what's interesting about the Eagles is, Jalen Hurts is a young quarterback that I don't know if anybody heading into this year had the expectations that he would play at the level that he did. Nearly an MVP during the regular season. Certainly would have been MVP if the Eagles had hung on to win that game. Played fantastic last night with, the exception of the fumble that was returned for a touchdown. But it just goes back to the point that he played great, the Eagles played great, and they make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and again, it will be interesting to see. There's not going to be a long runway for Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson. They need to get it right pretty quickly. All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
Hi, Dave. Great show. Howard from Marin County. I just had some thoughts after watching the Super Bowl. The first thought is the Browns are so far away from being a Super Bowl team, it's not even funny seeing how good the play is. Second thought is that they need to review penalty calls in the last 3 minutes, because clearly it looks like this game was thrown by the ref, like we saw where the guy just touched the guy's shirt, and an uncatchable ball, and all of a sudden the game is thrown to Kansas City. Thanks a lot. And again, very disappointing to see a Super Bowl end like that. So thanks a lot. Great show. Bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I didn't, in watching it, was kind of thinking the same way. And maybe I'm overly optimistic. I don't think the Browns are that far away. I think they have to do a whole lot of work with their defensive front seven. And if they do that, the piece of, you give me a wide receiver that can run vertically and horizontally, I think you're close to being there.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the first topic, Dave, is if your quarterback plays at an elite level, then you have a chance. And the Browns are counting on Deshaun Watson to do that. And obviously, how he played the final 6 games this year, that's not nearly good enough. But if he plays like he did in 2020, and you surround him with guys with talent, and the Browns have some of that, right? They have Nick Chubb, they have Amari Cooper, they have David Njoku, they have a good offensive line. I think plenty of teams would like, I guess my point is, if you compared them with Kansas City, I don't know if there's a big gap. And I thought Kansas City's offensive line was outstanding last night. The Eagles have an outstanding offensive line. So I think there are pieces in place for the Browns where if you get that type of quarterback play, they're not that far apart or far away. Now, yeah, you're 100% right. The D-line needs 3 new starters. You need more speed at receiver. But I think if you got that, kind of transcendent quarterback play, that's asking a lot. But that's what they're paying Deshaun Watson for. If you get that, I think everything else looks better because I don't think the Chiefs are a perfect team. They had a bunch of rookies starting on defense, yet they have a great quarterback and score a ton of points and win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and think of the guys they had at wide receiver. I mean, Kadarius Toney, the Giants basically gave him to the Chiefs. Sky Moore was a pick that they had that they developed. Juju Smith-Schuster. I'd rather have Amari Cooper. They have Travis Kelce, and he's transcendent. And they have Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And when, we talk about the Browns' priorities for the offseason, and we've had this discussion, I tend to put receiver a little bit lower because great offenses can make it work without 5 studs at receiver, right? I mean, yes, they have Travis Kelce, and then there's a drop-off. The Eagles have 2 really good receivers, but they're also not paying their quarterback a ton of money because he's on a rookie contract. So, I think you can make it work if your quarterback plays at a really high level, and it's not like the Browns don't have anything at receiver. They have Amari Cooper. They have Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think you throw David Njoku in the discussion. Now, this doesn't mean they don't need to get better, but I would be surprised if they spent a ton of money at that position in free agency. Now, maybe it's a second-round pick, and then you find a cheaper veteran, and you put those guys in the pile, and you say, okay, that's going to be enough, because that kind of feels like what the Chiefs did.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Well, during the Super Bowl, Nick Chubb tweets this, tired of watching. And, I could certainly understand that without question. I get it. He wants to go play.
Yeah, I assume he's talking about not being in the Super Bowl. Maybe he just was tired of the commercials. But, I thought that came through from Nick this season. Like, even at the beginning of the year in training camp, he talked about how important it was for this team to win and that he had kind of gotten to the point where he was fed up with not being a consistent playoff contender. And then obviously they missed the playoffs for the second year in a row. And even at the end of the year, I brought it up with Nick, and he just, he acknowledged it, but didn't want to go there because it was kind of raw and fresh. And I don't think he wanted to say the wrong thing. So I think he feels the clock ticking. I think he looks at himself and says, I'm too talented to be on a team that's not winning enough. We're probably too talented to not win more than they have been, give it with the exception of the 2020 playoff year. So it's interesting that he took to social media because he's not usually very active on there. But I do think that really is how he feels.
So this is from CBSSports.com, and it's really interesting. Lessons that can be learned from the Chiefs and Eagles. Number 1, don't settle for good enough at quarterback. Number 2, offensive line and line coaches are very important. Number 3, be willing to adjust your offensive philosophy. Find your matchup nightmares and attack with yards after the catch. It's kind of what I'm talking about with finding people that attack horizontally as well as vertically. Prioritize pass on defense. This one is really important and where the Browns really need some work. Find your game wreckers up front. Throw bodies at the secondary. And then be aggressive. And again, you can kind of see there are a couple of big points that are huge where the Browns need upticks there. And I agree with that. I think that's wholeheartedly. Find your matchup nightmares. David Njoku can be one of those. Go exploit that. And then game wreckers up front, they don't have nearly enough of them. You have Myles Garrett and a bunch of guys that kind of are living on his coattails.
Yeah, I think you got it exactly right, Dave. When I listen to that, I think that the Browns share those philosophies. And part of that might be because Andrew Berry worked with Howie Roseman in Philly for a year and really took a lot away from that time. But the Browns talk about being aggressive. In fact, Kevin Stefanski gets a lot of criticism because he's so aggressive. And you know, it worked for Nick Sirianni. He was really aggressive last night. There was even a 4th and 2 deep in their territory. I thought he was going to go for it, and he didn't. That surprised me a little bit, where Andy Reid kicked the field goal early, and I thought he should have gone for it. So, but the Browns believe in that. The Browns believe in average isn't good enough for quarterback. That's the whole reason they went after Deshaun Watson, right? So I believe they have those principles in place. Now it's about the execution. And you're right. It's about, I think, exploiting it more. Guys like David Njoku, if they get that speed threat at receiver, which they've lacked, even though they tried to fill that gap, and then the game wreckers up front. And I think that probably is where the gap is. They thought Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney was enough, and I would think that the Eagles show you that that's not enough. That you need more up front, and I think the hiring of Jim Schwartz as coordinator is a step in that direction.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. All right, before we go to break, Action Network has Super Bowl odds for next year already. Chiefs favorite plus 600, so 6-1. Bills 8.5-1. You got the Eagles, Bengals, 49ers, basically plus 900, so that's 9-1. Cowboys 1,500, Ravens 1,600. Browns are tied for 15th with Broncos and Saints at plus 350, 3,500. Scott, that's fair.
Seems a little low.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that they're behind Miami, they're behind the Jets. I get it. The Jets, people think they're going to get Aaron Rodgers. Behind Detroit, Jared Goff's their quarterback. It feels a little low.
The one thing I'd say is their defense needs so much. I think that's kind of go get some defensive guys, and that number will get you'll rise up quickly.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're right. I think and it's tough because Watson didn't play for so long and they didn't play great. But if you're ranking the quarterbacks, you would certainly hope, if you're the Browns, that he'd be higher, and usually so much of it is about the quarterbacks.
Yep, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason power rankings for the offseason, plus 3 words or fewer for each team. We'll tell you what they say about the Browns. Sports4CLE, be right back. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com, Scott Petrick. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
The quarterback situation with Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, I think if last night was any indication of what we need as a quarterback to get to the Super Bowl, we need a complete quarterback, which we have in Deshaun Watson. And having a mobile quarterback, it is okay, but it doesn't really get you far because you were so dependent on his legs. Now the defense takes him away, you have almost nothing. So I think having Deshaun and being able to scheme up plays and scheme up players open, I think Kevin has a long offseason ahead of him just because he has to get these guys going. Cooper, DPJ, whoever he brings in, Chubb, we have to be able to have success like the Chiefs, like the Eagles, and we have to thrive as an offense. So, go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, it's always fun creating an offense when you have players like Deshaun Watson and Nick. It beats the heck out of trying to figure out how are we going to do that with this guy's skill set.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think, the reason the Browns went and got Watson is because they thought he could do both. I mean, he led the league in passing, right, in 2020, the last time he played. So he's not just a running quarterback. And we saw that out of Mahomes. Mahomes, especially with the ankle, but even without the ankle. Yes, he gets outside of the pocket, makes plays, but it's almost all throwing the ball. He had the huge scramble last night, which is such an important added element that frustrates defenses. But he beats you with his arm and with his mind. And Jalen Hurts has more of the running in him. Obviously, he's younger. But he made, I don't know if it was 4 or 5 throws last night that were such big-time throws, put the ball exactly where it needed to be. And that's the type of quarterback play you need. So unless you're Tom Brady or Peyton Manning that, is highly accurate and Drew Brees, right, and can win every down from the pocket, it helps to have the dual threat. But the caller's right. It starts with the ability to throw, and that's what the Browns believe they have in Watson. Now it's finding the perfect mix with him, his receivers, and then, arguably the best running back in the league.
All right, so this is from ESPN.com. Early 2023 NFL Power Rankings off-season in 3 words or fewer. Chiefs 1, Eagles 2, 49ers 3, Bengals 4, Bills are number 5. Browns check in at number 19, off-season in 3 words or fewer. Meshing with Watson. Watson's ranked 27th QBR, 38.3 is Cleveland's offensive efficiency centered in his return. Considering Watson didn't play during 2021, either rust was expected. He now has the offseason to develop chemistry in and with Cleveland's offense. Scott, you and I have talked about this. The other thing it doesn't take into account is you couldn't really design a offense last year for Deshaun Watson and then have Jacoby Brissett run it for the first 11 games. So there are a lot of things working, but I get it. People that are saying Watson has to play better, he does.
Yeah, to me that's where it starts, Dave. I mean, you're right about the offense and having the kind of the dual systems with Brissett, and then you make the flip to Watson, and you change. Kevin Stefanski changed some things, but it wasn't a dramatic overhaul. And I don't know if we're going to see a dramatic overhaul to next year. You're still going to see Nick Chubb run the ball 19 or 20 times a game. You're still going to see play action and bootlegs off the play action and those staples of a Kevin Stefanski system. But you will see more design quarterback runs. You'll see more RPOs. You probably see more shotgun, even whether it's runs out of the shotgun or passes out of the shotgun. So the offense will change. I don't know if it'll drastically change, and I get what ESPN is saying there, and it makes sense. But to me, it's more about Watson playing better than the mesh part. And I'm not saying that doesn't have any part of this, but I think Watson just needs to play better. He wasn't good. He didn't look comfortable in the pocket a lot for those 6 games, and I think that's one of the last things to come back when you haven't played a bunch. I thought he threw it all right, but it was hit or miss. The same with, him as a runner and him as a scrambler. So I think for me, it starts there. He just needs to be better, and then I think everything around him will be better.
So this is interesting as well along those lines. Super Bowl winning leading rusher base salary chart. All right, so Isaiah Pacheco making $87,000. Cam Akers from the Rams, $89,000. Leonard Fournette, an expensive one at $2 million. Damian Williams, just over $1 million. Sony Michel, $480,000. Blunt from the Eagles, and then the Patriots before that, both under $1 million. C.J. Anderson, Blunt again, $730,000. You get the idea. It is a low salary structure for the running back. on the winning team, the leading rusher in the Super Bowl. Nick Chubb's base salary, $10.85 million in 2023. So the debate keeps it's gonna go on, because you look at those numbers and you look at Nick Chubb. There's not only one way to do it, but if you're paying a running back that much, you got to find ways to pay other positions a little less.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're paying. It starts with the quarterback, right? When you're paying the quarterback $45 million, you have to scrimp somewhere. And a lot of times that's at the running back position. And to me, Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta would never have drafted Nick Chubb at the top of the second round. And they would never have, in their wildest dreams, they wouldn't have thought they would pay a running back $10 million. Yet they inherited Nick Chubb, who is probably the best running back in the league, and the example of how you want your guys, how you want your players to act and to work and to behave themselves and all that. So therefore you can't just get rid of him. And they decided to extend him, and I don't think they had another choice. I'd be stunned if let's say this regime hangs around for another decade. I'd be stunned if they ever drafted a running back, in the 30s. I'd be stunned if they ever paid one that kind of money, because you can find value for much cheaper, and you can find production for much cheaper. But having Nick Chubb now, because that's where they are, then they have to figure out how to maximize him and how to save money at other spots on the roster.
Yeah, and Pacheco, the first guy that was the leading rusher for the Chiefs, was a 7th-round pick out of Rutgers last year. So, all right, before we go to break, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, I'd like to address the wide receiver room. I think we have 2 or 3 solid receivers. I think we just need one more really good guy. And I'm not sure if we should spend the money for free agency. They're pretty expensive. I was wondering if maybe they can move up in the draft and pick up somebody like Josh Downs, who would pretty much set the wide receiver room. I also wondered what happened to Isaiah Weston. He got hurt last year. He injured his knee. And I wondered what his status was. He's 6'4", 225, and I think he runs a 4.42 or 4.43. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I'm not saying they should go out and spend $20 million. I don't think you can count on a guy. First, I don't think they're going to be able to trade up. You don't have the assets, and you have other holes that you have to fill. I don't know that you can count on a rookie to come in and make the type of impact. I mean, it's going to be a second-round pick, likely. What if it's another thing like with Anthony Schwartz, where it just takes time to develop?
Yeah, it's a really tough spot, Dave. You look at even Sky Moore, right? Has a touchdown last night. He did not have a big year for the Chiefs. And I think he was a second-round pick. So, I think that's tough. I don't think they're going to spend $20 million on a receiver. Can they find a guy for 8 or 10 that gives them what they need? Maybe. I think that's the first avenue. But I could see the second-round pick being the fallback. And like I said earlier, maybe you pair him with a really cheap, under-the-radar receiver you can pick up in free agency and kind of hope together they fill that speed void you're looking for. I wouldn't expect the Browns to trade up. They've given away their number 1 picks in 3 straight drafts for Watson. I don't think, you probably have to give up a number 1 to move into the first round. I wouldn't rule out, but I don't think that's likely. I think the likely ones are middle-of-the-road free agent or second-round draft pick.
Scott Petrick and I can step aside, take another quick timeout, head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, plus some first-year Browns that probably aren't going to be back. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave Frank from Cleveland. Been a minute. I always watch the show, though, even though you don't hear from me all the time. But I know everything that's been talking about this trade speculation. You nailed it, though. You got to give something of value to get something in value in return. But shouldn't we just let Jim Schwartz decide who's expandable and who he wants to keep, and then we could work from there? It's sort of premature, but, I mean, I'm sure he's already going over the film and everything. All right, Dave, great show. Love you, brother, and you be safe. Bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I would imagine Jim Schwartz can have a whole lot of input as to what they do on that defensive side of the ball.
It's interesting because when we talked to him after he got hired, he kind of downplayed that, right? It's up to Andrew Berry in the front office, the personnel department. He did an interview with the team's in-house radio, and he said the same thing. It's not about me deciding which players I want. He goes, yeah, I say what we want. You know, he goes, when they evaluate, whether it's free agents or draft eligible guys, they say how this guy would fit in the scheme, right? So he will have a say. My guess is it's a greater say than he's letting on. But, you know, he's not going to have the final say. Andrew Berry is the GM. Andrew Berry conceivably would be here longer than Jim Schwartz. And, you know, maybe you need players that can play in multiple schemes and not just the Jim Schwartz scheme. But, yeah, given his experience, given his success rate, he should have a voice, but it's probably not the loudest voice.
All right, this from Dog Pound Daily. First-year Browns players that didn't earn a second season. There's 3 of them. We'll run. There's actually 4 of them. Let's run through them. Defensive tackle, Taven Bryant. Defensive end, Chase Winovich. Now, Winovich was hurt a lot, so we didn't get to see him a whole lot. And then 2 tight ends, Pharaoh Brown and Jesse James. Scott, I wouldn't be surprised if Taven Bryant and Chase Winovich are both back as situational guys because Jim Schwartz is going to play more defense. He's going to rotate people in, and I think Bryant and Winovich, if you use them in pass rushing situations, can be effective.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on those guys. Obviously, they're not going to break the bank with either of them. You know, Brian, they might even need to take a pay cut. I think he's around $4 million. I don't think they would pay that for just a rotational guy. He is a former first-round pick. I'm sure the Browns liked him even when Jacksonville had him, so that's why they took a shot on him. You know, Winovich is weird because he missed so much time with the injury starting in training camp that he never got to show anything. And I think there is pass rush ability there. So I could see him having some success in the Schwartz system. It's just a matter, do you trust him? Do you trust him to bring him back? Can he get a better offer somewhere else? So I wouldn't close the door on either of those guys. And then to me, Pharaoh Brown's an interesting one because he really added something from a physical perspective to the tight end room. Not that Njoku's not a good blocker, he is. But Brown is bigger and stronger. He adds a different dimension that maybe they don't think they'll need when you have Watson for a whole year. Maybe they plan to spread it out more and it's not even a thought. But I wouldn't assume that he doesn't come back because I think he has a dimension that some other guys don't.
Yeah, I would agree. And remember, they traded Mack Wilson for Chase Winovich as well. Hamstring injury, that's tough for a speed guy like him. That's a tough injury to come back from. So we'll see. This is from Jack Duffin. It's kind of interesting. Edge rusher that could be a free agent target that would make sense. Oquanro, and you see 12th out of 129, 10th out of 129 with a pass rush grade. He's got the agility that they like. That RAS score measures, relative athletic skills or agility. And he's younger, 27, halfway through, 27 and a half, for lack of a better term. So that very well could be a guy they look at as their starter opposite Myles Garrett on that other side.
Yeah, I've seen his name before. I know that there's people out there that are high on him. It seems to fit the kind of profile the Browns would be looking for. They've gone Clowney feels older. I don't think he is. He just feels because he's been around for so long. You had Olivier Vernon, who's around 30. But I'm all for finding a guy that you can pair with Myles Garrett for longer than a year or two, and I don't think that guy's going to come in the second round. So why not get a guy, and if you're turning 28, you can sign a 4-year deal, and that's the first 2 years are guaranteed, and then you can make a decision after that if you're the team. That kind of feels like a sweet spot age and scenario, even though he's not the biggest name because, nobody's paying attention to the Texans.
All right, before we go to break, Titans defensive free agents that Jim Schwartz and the Browns could target. This from BrownsWire.com. Defensive lineman Mario Edwards Jr. We're going to go with a defensive end as well, DeMarcus Walker. Defensive end Terrell Basham. Kalu, safety, and nickelback, which is kind of interesting. Joshua Kalu, safety, nickelback, and then linebacker David Long Jr., maybe a little undersized. When you look at those, any of those intrigue you? I say the nickelback, slotback's interesting because, we've already talked a lot about Greg Newsome, doesn't want to play that position.
Yeah, that is intriguing. I'm kind of eager to see how that Newsome thing plays out. Maybe he sits down with Jim Schwartz and Kevin Stefanski and they find the compromise, right? You're going to play a bunch outside, but hey, certain games, certain matchups, you're going to have to play in the nickel. I would assume Greg Newsome would be okay with that. I've never gotten the impression that he's real selfish. And if they can find that right balance, I get not wanting to play in the slot all the time. He also doesn't have a whole lot of leverage, right? He's 2 years into a, 5-year contract, so I don't think he can demand a trade. He just kind of has to suck it up if they really wanted to play hardball. But that bears watching. I mean, you talked about they're going to have to add pieces across the defensive line. So if it's adding a bunch of depth at the end, that doesn't surprise me. Linebacker is where I just don't know exactly what Schwartz is going to look for. He talks about giving the guys up front a bunch of freedom, right? His tackles and his ends, and taking the seatbelt off them and wanting them to be really aggressive, which means your linebackers have to clean up a lot of stuff. And they have to make a lot of plays and have an impact behind them. And I'd be curious to think if he has those guys on Brown's roster or if he needs to add somebody, maybe even especially somebody he's got a lot of familiarity with.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, plus Andrew Berry's draft history. We'll take a look at how it lays out in terms of age and then where people were picked. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for taking my call. I'm baffled on why the Browns draft a player for a certain position and then move them to a slot where they didn't perform that position in college. The same thing happened with Jedrick Wills, and now Haslam is trying to be part owner of the Bucs. It's like he's using the players as like their resources or cattle or something to sell to market. I have a problem with that. So I just would just like to see the Browns, like the Green Bay Packers, own their own team. Thanks for taking my question.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, we've had a couple of questions about that. Packers are grandfathered in, meaning there's not going to be a municipally owned football team in the NFL. It's not going to happen. It would bankrupt the city because it's in the billions of dollars to own a franchise. As far as Jimmy Haslam doesn't have anything to do with the players being switched around. Newsome is different than Wills. I get the thought with, Wills was a right tackle, and switching him to left tackle, that's tough. Newsome was more out of, a thought then they planned on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's. I mean, it's not like they're asking him to play safety, right? I mean, he's playing outside versus inside. That's what you do. I don't think a whole lot of guys get drafted in the NFL only playing slot nickel in college, because your best guys are outside. And then the ones that fit the body type, fit the quickness, agility aspect of it, which Greg has and some guys don't, right? Greedy Williams couldn't play in the slot. We'll see if Martin Emerson Jr. can't. He feels too big to me to play in the slot. That's just, kind of how Greg fits in that role. I get it. Wills has not lived up to the number 10 pick in the draft, but I don't think it's because he's playing on the left side. To me, Jed Wills' biggest issues are consistency and the willingness to finish plays, which he admits that he continues to work on. And that doesn't matter if you're on the left side or right side. So, I think the Browns have a lot of problems. I don't know if I would put those, moving guys out of position. To me, that's not a real concern.
Also brought up the story about Jimmy Haslam potentially purchasing a minority interest in the Bucs. He already, the Haslam Group already owns the Columbus Crew of Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. The fact that they want their family legacy to be about professional sports ownership. And they're not the only ones. There's a lot of families out there, a lot of people that own multiple sports franchises. It's easier to do now. There used to be restrictions about owning multiple, teams across multiple sports. That's changed within the last, 5 or 10 years. But it's obviously obvious that the Haslams really enjoy this and expanded to the Crew. Now we're looking to expand to the NBA. And, if I had a ton of money, I might do that too, because it seems like a smart investment. It seems like a lot of fun. Obviously, they enjoy being around professional athletes in that environment. It's a different environment. I think it's a fun and exciting environment. And what's interesting about the Bucs, which I just learned today, is they don't really have a majority owner. There's like 4 people or 4 groups that own a quarter of the franchise. So they kind of take turns with who's in charge, I guess, is the main owner. So it's an interesting area to go into. The Bucs have they won a championship recently. Maybe Jimmy Haslam could learn something.
All right, let's take a look at this. This is Andrew Berry's draft history, so it's 2020 to 2022, and it's hard to read, but the age is going up and down. So and then the picks go from left to right, so based on where you're picked. And what you see is Jedrick Wills and Greg Newsome and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Grant Delpit are all on the younger side, really, of everybody that's been drafted. And especially with Wills and Newsome, it's important to note those are first-round picks, so they can be extended to a 5th year. That's one of the reasons that they put those guardrails up, is so that you're not negotiating a second contract with a guy who's been successful and he's going to be 33 at the end of that term. But again, it gives you a little visual thing. All the little dots are draft picks from everywhere, and then Andrew Berry's draft picks are there by name. Koramoah and Delpit, second-round picks. But it seems like the earlier they pick, the younger they want them, because they plan on developing guys.
Yeah, that's my biggest takeaway from there. That when they expand to older guys, it's usually late in the draft, right? You get a guy you like character-wise, a Demetric Felton, and Isaiah Thomas. Guys that, if you waste a pick late in the draft, it's no big deal, but maybe you get a couple of years out of them. They're more polished, you would think, having played more college football, just being older. But with the early picks, you like the potential. It's a lot about talent, potential. Obviously, the best players come out earlier, which that factors into this too. And I think we've talked about it, Dave. It'll be interesting to see if Berry and DePodesta, because he's a big part of this, if they venture away from that, given in this draft, just given the need to win right now, the sense of urgency, do you say, okay, we're just going to take maybe somebody that we feel is more established in the second round versus a guy that's 21, 22? I don't know how they'll go on that, but I could see maybe they make an exception this year.
Yeah, I would, again, in just because you feel your roster is at the point where you need to get people that can contribute now as opposed towards building. Having said that, you always got to keep your eye 3-4 years down the road as well. All right, before we go, couple of Browns coaches that have been tied to places. Sources predict Browns defensive line coach Chris Kiffin will join the Houston Texans staff. That's from Aaron Wilson. And then Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, Cleveland kid, who went to St. Ignatius High School. He's going to be a finalist for the Cardinals head coaching job. If he lands that job this week, Drew Petzing, Browns quarterback coach, would be a leading name for offensive coordinator on Gannon's staff. Gannon and Petzing were together in Minnesota. Kevin Stefanski also part of that staff. So it's interesting. There may be some more changing of the guard, if you will, on the staffs, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, and I would expect that to be finalized this week, right? We should have the final head coaching vacancies filled, Indianapolis and Arizona, and then people can finally set their staffs. It looks like Kiffin's going to go to Houston. You know, last offseason, he was going to join his brother Lane at Mississippi, and then had a change of heart and asked the Browns and Kevin Stefanski if he could come back. And he did, but obviously it feels like it's tenuous, and Houston's got a new coach. The Browns have a new coordinator who specializes in defensive line, probably wants to bring in maybe his own defensive line guy. And then Petzing, you know, one of the reasons Kevin Stefanski moved him to quarterback coach this year is to get him more prepared for the coordinator openings that he expected to come his way. And I don't know if that was specifically with Jonathan Gannon in mind or not, but that was why Petzing was moved from tight end to quarterbacks coach. So it would follow that he gets a chance to be coordinator somewhere. But let's say he doesn't. Let's say Gannon doesn't get the job, then Petzing probably stays. So that's why there's some still pieces to be moved on the Browns staff.
Scott Petrak, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Elyria Chronicle, Telegram, as well as brownzone.com online. Always really good Brown stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Jackson McCurry from the Dogland and Top Dogs podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
So watching the Super Bowl, the one thing that kind of like made me worry a little bit was the man coverage. The schedule that we have to cover each and every man that we have, because we have DK Metcalf, we have Brandon Ayuk, we have Deebo Samuel, we have Cooper Kupp. We have all these great wide receivers that we're going to be playing, and I do not want man coverage to be our issue. We have the talented cornerbacks to do it, but at the same time, they're young, and they don't have much experience like these veteran wide receivers that's about to come face us. And if the pressure doesn't get home, I think our back end of our defense is still going to be in trouble. So I think Schwartz has to get creative with this scheme and allow our DBs to have success, because we're going to find ourselves back in the same spot if we don't help our cornerback and our safety. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Jackson McCurry from the Dogland and Top Dogs podcast. Jackson, it's not going to be exclusively zone, or it hasn't been exclusively zone that Jim Schwartz plays. He does like to get after it at the line of scrimmage, and it's going to be real important that they get a free safety that can erase things as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the key things that the Browns have to do this offseason, is to find that true free safety. I seen today somebody goes, well, we have it in Grant Delpit, and I just respectfully disagree with that take. I think Delpit's more suited as a strong safety, someone in the box. I think free safety is definitely something they need to address this offseason. You know, with the whole man and zone thing, I think our corners are very well suited to play in man. I think zone was the major issue with this defense last year and during the Joe Woods tenure. So while we are facing a very talented group of receivers this upcoming season, I think our corners are suited to go toe-to-toe with those receivers as well.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I think they're better, and they want to play man coverage, because if you're an elite corner, you have the man talent. How you got to that point as a corner is because you want the challenge, and I think they have three guys in Newsome, Emerson, and Ward that are wired like that. This is from Dog Pound Daily. 4 terrible decisions by the Browns in 2022. Number 4, playing Anthony Schwartz. Number 3, holding on to running back Kareem Hunt. Number 2, extending David Njoku. And number 1, not fixing defensive tackle. I can't disagree. Number 1 is huge and really jumps out. I get it with Kareem Hunt. About Anthony Schwartz, you got to play him. You got to see what you have. Right now, it has not been pretty. You hope he can come through, because you can't teach his speed. And I am a fan of David Njoku. I don't think the problem is extending him. The problem is go find a matchup with him to exploit.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I totally loved when they got the deal done with Njoku. I thought that was the best move. And if you look at his numbers, he played like a top 10 tight end this year. He just, there was games he missed because of injury. That's always been one of the negatives when it comes to Njoku, but I loved them locking him up. I still think there's pieces in his game that have not been discovered yet. And I think if he gets the timing and the chemistry down with Deshaun Watson, I think he can break out and even be a top 5 tight end. I think he's got the talent. And as far as the Anthony Schwartz thing goes, I loved it when we drafted him in 2021. I thought he would be a great piece to this offense. The injury bug has bit him more than enough times, and the whole catching the ball thing, but you still hope that the talent will finally come through this upcoming season. But he's definitely on the chopping block as we go into the offseason, and the closer we get to training camp, I definitely think he's one of the guys on the bubble.
Yeah, it's a make or break year for him. At some point, you got to get on the field, and that speed has to translate to football, and for whatever reason, it just hasn't. All right, post-Super Bowl power rankings, good news, bad news for each team. 33rdteam.com. These are former NFL executives and personnel people who are part of this website. Number 1, the Chiefs. Number 2, the Eagles. Number 3, the Bengals. Browns check in at 23rd. Good news. The last time Deshaun Watson played a full season, he threw 33 touchdown passes, averaged nearly 9 yards per attempt. Bad news. Browns' first-round pick is the property of Watson's former team, the Houston Texans. You only worry about the first-round picks if Deshaun Watson doesn't play the way you think he was going to.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, what is it this year? Houston's got the 12th pick because of us.
Yep.
So, yeah, you don't like that first-round pick is so high. But if Watson doesn't live up to what the deal was, the contract, the trade, everything, you're really going to – this is really going to hurt the franchise in a major way. It's going to set us back maybe a decade. That's how big this has to be, and this is why it's so important that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and even Deshaun Watson himself make sure that this is the right decision. They have the right pieces, and that Deshaun Watson gets back to what he was 3 years ago. And I think that's the bad news too. Watson's last season, we're going on 3 years ago now, Dave. Like, you hope Deshaun can get back to that form. He did not look good the last 6 games of the year, but you got to hope, being with his teammates, having a full offseason to work with, hopefully there's no more distractions. And you hope Watson can get back to that level. Yeah,
and hopefully the Browns tailor an offense to him that becomes as explosive as they thought and expected it to be when they went out and gave up all the assets to get him. Jackson McCurry and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns, talk a little bit of free agency straight ahead. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jackson McCurry from the Dogland and Top Dogs podcast. This is from BrownsWire.com. One free agent each team should want to sign in 2023. For the Browns, they go with defensive tackle Greg Gaines. Rams defensive tackle Gaines, a substantial anchor in the run game, and has even shown prowess as a consistent to create consistent pressure, would be just a stepping stone to rebuilding that defensive front, but a big one. And he's coming off of his rookie deal. Jackson, I don't know a lot about the specifics of Greg Gaines, but the way that's described, that's exactly what the Browns should be looking for at defensive tackle.
Yeah, we know that that's the position I think they're going to heavily target in free agency. And I think Gaines is a nice depth piece. I wouldn't, sign him to a substantial kind of contract. 2021 was a breakout year for him. He had 38 total pressures and 6 sacks. And, of course, the Rams defense, they led him to a Super Bowl. This year was a down year for him. He only had 16 pressures, but he still had 4 sacks, which, I think Jim Schwartz wants defensive tackles that can get after the quarterback. So I think Gaines would be a nice depth signing. I don't know who they're going to target in free agency specifically, but, they have to revamp that whole room. So if they get Greg Gaines and then get a guy like a Sheldon Rankins or a Dalvin Tomlinson, guys that I've had my eye on, I think Daron Payne's just going to cost too much if he doesn't get franchised. But I think Gaines would be a nice secondary piece to that defensive tackle room.
Yeah, and keep in mind, with Myles Garrett coming off the edge, you're going to get guys running into you to try to step up into the pocket as a defensive tackle. That is what makes it so concerning that the Browns had such low sack totals with everybody not named Myles Garrett last year. One former Browns player the Browns should bring back in 2023. This from Dog Pound Daily. They go with Jabril Peppers. Last year in a role, it suited him well. Often played close to the line of scrimmage. 60 tackles, fumble recovery in New England. PFF ranking solid 75. His attacking, aggressive style play would fit with what Jim Schwartz and the Browns' style is expected to be. Jabril Peppers, if it's Grant Delpit, it's kind of a redundancy in that role.
Yeah, I mean, Delpit needs a backup, and Jabril Peppers would be a nice backup safety for Delpit. But, yeah, I loved Jabril when he was here. I really hated when he was involved in the OBJ trade just because he came on at the end of 2018, and I thought he was going to have a solid role in this defense for the next couple of years. And unfortunately, injuries hurt him in New York. He rebounded this past season, like that article mentioned, in New England. I think he could get a nice free agent deal, find a nice spot to be a starter, maybe stay in New England. But, like I mentioned with the whole free safety issue, Grant Delpit is our box safety. Jabril Peppers is a box safety. So that's not really going to work. But, I hope Jabril does well. And who knows, if he doesn't get any suitors in free agency and the Browns want to add an extra safety, bring Jabril back home to Cleveland.
Yeah, I agree. It just doesn't address the need. I'm with you. I think they really need a free safety. All right, before I let you go, 5 bold predictions for 2023 offseason for the Browns. This from Dog Pound Daily. Number 5, the Browns don't target a defensive tackle early in the draft. Number 4, third wide receiver is added in free agency. Number 3, Jedrick Wills does not get his 5th-year option picked up. Number 2, John Johnson is released. And number 1, Deshaun Watson restructures his contract already. Of those, the one that I think is least likely to happen is I think Jedrick Wills is getting his 5th-year option picked up. He hadn't lived up to the 10th spot in the draft, but at 14.75, it's kind of middling for price range for a left tackle.
Yeah, I think with the cap exploding, I just like 14 million's like middle tier of offensive tackles, and that's really what Jedrick Wills is right now. I think the talent is there. I just wonder about his motivation, his desire to succeed in this league. I think Bill Callahan has done all he could in terms of developing Wills. I think at this point, it's all on Jedrick to show what his worth is and potentially get a contract extension, whether it's here or whether he tests the free agent market. But I do think they pick up the option whenever that window opens. The one bold prediction out of that I wouldn't be shocked at is if they don't target a defensive tackle early. I could see them taking one late day 2, early day 3, but I think the additions at D tackle are going to come in free agency just because the crop of defensive tackles in the draft doesn't really wow you unless you're getting a guy like a Jalen Carter, but he's a top 5 pick in this draft. The Browns aren't even going to be in position to get him. So I would not be shocked if they don't take a D tackle early in this draft. So I don't think that's a bold prediction, but crazier things have happened with the Browns.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. They need immediate impacts from defensive tackles. So that, and same thing with the wide receiver. I think you need immediate impacts from those defensive tackle, wide receiver, and those are the 2 areas I think they probably target. And I don't think they're going to be high priced. I think they're going to be guys that fit what they're going to ask them to do a specific thing, and they're going to do it well. And that's what I think they're going to do in free agency as well. Jackson McCurry, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jackson.
Thank you for having me, Dave. Have a good one.
You too, Jackson McCurry. Make sure you check him out, the Dogland and Top Dogs podcast. All right, before we go, some Cavs news as well. So Danny Green is reportedly getting ready to agree to a 1-year, $2 million deal with the Cavaliers after he clears waivers. He took a buyout. He was with the Spurs, Raptors, and Lakers. Went to the championship. Has played with the Spurs as well as the Raptors and the Lakers in championship series. Has 165 playoff games in his career. Played 3 games for the Grizzlies this season before he took the buyout from them. 8 months rehabbing a torn ACL. That's the reason he's only played a handful of games this year. Green has averaged 8.7 points, 3.4 rebounds over his 14 seasons. He was originally drafted by the Cavaliers. Veteran presence, can knock down some threes and can play a little bit of D. Again, he's 35, so you're not going to get a bunch of minutes out of him, but he could be a very productive piece off the bench for this young Cavaliers team. Again, Danny Green reportedly getting ready to sign a 1-year, $2 million deal with the Cavs. That's a good thing, without question. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.